This week, the Trump effect. From big tech policy changes to Democrats calling 77 million voters bigots. Our panel reacts. The anniversary of January 6th has come and gone, but one talk show host says few events in history have been worse, and it should never be forgotten. And did a star college quarterback get the cold shoulder for his declaration of faith on the national stage? These stories and much more straight ahead this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome into this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capital, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Now let's meet our panel, some of the men and women behind the stories at readlion.com. Josh Mann is our managing editor, Adam Wittenberg, deputy managing editor, and Valerie Cabana is our media contributor here at The Lion. Panel, welcome to all of you today as we dive into the headlines. And Valerie, we'll start with you ladies first this week. One of the stories that I know is... themes, I should say, rather than stories, consistent at readlion.com, the story of life. We cover the reversal of Roe versus Wade and the subsequent stories that have shaken out over the last couple of years because of it. What do you know? What do you have as the latest?
So before Roe v. Wade was overturned, abortion pills accounted for around 50% of all abortions being prescribed by a doctor. Well, now a lot of abortions, 67% around, are happening because of the abortion pill. And a lot of those are because of telehealth that are prescribing abortion pills across state lines. Now, not every case, but in these instances, the patient isn't even seeing a doctor before taking the abortion pill. And this is alarming because it can produce serious health issues in the woman if she is not properly taken care of medically. For instance, ectopic pregnancies, they're rare, but they happen. If you take an abortion pill, but you're actually having an ectopic pregnancy, it can become life-threatening for you because it does not dissolve the pregnancy. Now, what does happen is it stays in your tube. An ectopic pregnancy is where it forms in your fallopian tube outside of the uterus, and it can rupture, causing internal bleeding, leading to life-threatening emergency situations or even death. And so this is incredibly dangerous. And so it's really something that we should be aware of and bring awareness to these women who are taking that as an option of how dangerous it can be for them.
And Josh, this is significant because, again, as we cover this at readlion.com, I think I speak for the panel. I think I speak for most of us that work on readlion.com that we look at pregnancy as, right away, straight away, fertilization. And that means these prescription drugs that you get through the mail, many of us, I would say, call that abortion. And I guess that's where often the debate begins, because if you do accept that as the term, then we've seen a rise. I mean, since Roe versus Wade has been overturned, as the story says, more people are getting these drugs through the mail.
Yes, that's right. And especially a rise in medication used for abortion. So procedures in the year 2000 accounted for all of the abortions that happened. This is where a human life is ended in the womb. And by 2023, that was nearly 7 in 10 abortions happened by medication, and only 3 in 10 or so happened by procedure. And so the ease with which a young lady can get a pill through telehealth in her dorm room or wherever and end a human life is astounding, really, from a pro-life perspective. And so I think the trends are concerning, and not to mention the danger, the safety issues, which are a huge part of this. And I think we can't lose sight of this whole discussion about life and the dignity of life.
Adam, I think that's the thing that many are maybe surprised about. I certainly was. When you heard Roe versus Wade is overturned, the cry was, well, there goes a woman's right to have an abortion, when in fact it seems, and I think much to the chagrin of most pro-life folks, just the opposite has happened. And in fact, abortions have increased.
Yeah, it is very sad to see. On the other hand, that should lessen some of the fear tactics used by the pro-abortion lobby. Missouri is a great example. The state hasn't had an abortion clinic open in several years. Voters just overturned the ban, but it's not like the state of Missouri is some horrible place or people are suffering. I mean, we don't think pregnancy is suffering anyway. I mean, pregnancy is a good thing, but people act like, Trump's going to stop all abortions and, get us back to the back alleys. But really, they found this workaround, and it's part of the cheapening of human life, and it's horrible that this is happening. And like Valerie mentioned, there can be, many health concerns that happen. So this is not a good thing, and people need to know about it.
These culture stories, this is just some of it. Josh, you've got another great story this week at readlion.com. In Delaware, they're debating the issue of assisted suicide. This is another life issue to those of us that care about the life issue. It's the other side of it. Oftentimes it's elderly folks or very, very gravely ill folks that either wish to end their lives themselves or maybe their loved ones do.
That's right. And so Governor Jon Cryer, he's on his way out. There's a new governor-elect, Matt Meyer. Well, Carney's, as a Catholic, does not believe in physician-assisted suicide, and so he vetoed a bill that came to his desk that the Democrats brought recently. And so with the new guy coming in who supports physician-assisted suicide, the Democrats there are thinking this is our chance. And so they have a physician-assisted suicide bill that they think will get passed and get to the governor's desk. The new governor will likely sign it. But we've just reported recently that in Canada, physician-assisted suicide has become the 5th leading cause of death in the country, and that even those who were for it initially are now really concerned with how prevalent it is and how easily it's approved. So in Canada, you have to apply for this, and you're terminally ill, you're facing whatever kinds of terrible situations that some folks face, but the doctors up there say it's really easy to get. Sometimes it doesn't seem necessary, and so it's a road I don't think we want to go down, but clearly in Delaware there's some Democrats who think that it's something that they want to try.
Another ugly side of the culture coin this week, Valerie, comes in Colorado, where a bizarre story. I mean, far too often we hear about child pornography in public schools, but it also involves the death of a school official. Tell us what you know.
Yeah, so anytime a school fires a senior leader, it's shady. And in this case, a school's chief of staff for the Jeffco Public Schools in Colorado, he was fired. Parents didn't know why. They weren't explicit about the reasoning. And then he wound up dead over the holidays by suicide. Turns out that he had been charged or was investigating child pornography. But the kicker is it wasn't this person's first offense. It wasn't his second or his third or his fourth. It was his 5th. And so if he had been fired on that first offense, and not even just the first offense, but he should have been arrested. If he had been arrested, it would have kept so many other children from harm's way. And so you send your kids to school thinking that they're going to be protected, that these people who are around them every day are going to be vetted, that they are going to be safe. But in this case, that's just not what happened, and it sounds like a mega lawsuit's coming.
Adam, it has been not a secret that public schools have a pretty tough time hiring right now for various reasons. Is this one of the ugly consequences of that or something else?
Yeah, I think it's actually something we can take a step back and look at, is that should public schools and public school districts be as big as they are? Here at The Lion, we write a lot about micro schools, hybrid schools, homeschool co-ops, and I'm a big fan of returning education to the local level. Now, I did just a little bit of research. This school district has 81,000 students. It's one of the largest, or probably the largest in Colorado. It's right near Denver. It actually includes Columbine High School, which was in the news, several decades ago. And so what happened here was there were 5 total cases, not against the same person, but the guy that died was the 5th case in the past year. And so our article explains different allegations, electronic sexual communication against different school officials and employees. But when you have this vast expanse, 81,000 students, thousands or maybe 10,000 or more employees, anything can happen. And it's hard to know the people that you're with. And that's one reason why we are strong advocates for school choice, but also these hybrid micro schools, startup schools, and locally based schools with local control. Know those who are educating your children or be part of it, homeschool co-op, and things like that.
And Josh, it's no secret that school unions often protect some of these pretty vile characters.
Yeah, and we're also concerned with the ease with which these investigations get swept under the rug. Oftentimes, school officials, employees will resign. They'll move on. The school district can't disclose information they claim because of, the privacy of the employee. And then these same folks end up working at other school districts. And so it's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And I think, it's contributed to the mass exodus from public education.
We're going to talk a little more in the show about the reaction to the Trump election, and are some of the stories at readline.com, in fact, a fallout, if you want, or a reaction to Donald Trump's election. And that, Adam, we go back to you and ask you about this trend, what seems to be a trend in San Francisco, of reversing some policies on things like homelessness and drugs.
Yeah, San Francisco, ultra-leftist, ultra-liberal city, home of Nancy Pelosi and other folks, they've had this rampant homelessness problem for decades. I think when I visited there a few years back, it was about 6,000 sleeping on the streets. Now it's about 8,000. It's gone up. And California has spent billions, I think $24 billion in just the last few years, with little or nothing to show. Homelessness has actually increased. What's happening in San Francisco is voters have actually said, we're done. And a new law just took effect that if you're receiving cash payments from the government and you're an addict or suspected addict, homeless, or possibly in low-income housing, if you want to keep getting those cash benefit payments, you have to go to drug treatment. And additionally, there's a city or county councilor there who is a recovering addict himself. He's calling out the city, and I'll just read one of his quotes because it's really great. He said, "It's time for San Francisco to move beyond the civic practice of drug enablism and neglectful cruelty." He's calling it out. They claim to be so humanitarian and so kind and helping people and free money and all these things. And yet he's saying you're enabling people and it's time to stop.
Panel, thank you. When we get back, some in Hollywood still think Trump won the election because of bigotry. Noted political strategist James Carville doesn't see it that way, though. And Mark Zuckerberg seems to have done a complete 180. That's all when The Lion Week in Review returns. Welcome back to The Lion Week in Review. If you missed any of today's show, remember you can always catch it in full at YouTube and keep up to date on all the day's news at readlion.com. And panel, we turn back to you for reaction to some sound outside our newsroom. And we'll start with the continued post-mortem of this most recent presidential election. Former First Lady Michelle Obama cutting a PSA of sorts for the new Obama Library had this reaction. For many Americans, she says she speaks on behalf of, that Donald Trump won the election. Take a listen.
Happy holidays, everyone. I know it's been a difficult few months for so many of us, and that folks are feeling a little bit anxious and uncertain. But even during these tough times, there are plenty of reasons to stay hopeful.
Yeah, all very positive stuff, it sounds, but it was kind of intriguing to me off the top that Mrs. Obama seemed to suggest that people were having, I believe what she said, tough times. But there was still reason to be hopeful, and the Obamas were going to bring it. Jon Cryer, a guy many of you may know if you watch 2.5 Men, he was an 80s movie star. He's not a fan of Donald Trump, that's safe to say. And he went on Bill Maher's podcast to offer his thoughts as to why Donald Trump won. Take a listen to this conversation.
It's
Some
terrifying.
kids these days actually just do want to be trans.
I
It's
don't
cooler,
agree.
John.
I don't
it's
agree.
a thing.
Nope. I don't agree.
Come on.
I don't agree with Bill Maher.
I know.
That's the name of the show tonight.
Well, your eyes are not open to that, I
Okay.
think.
Well,
I
okay, you
there
can-
are some kids,
yeah.
especially, why is it like so much more prevalent like here than Indiana?
Well-
are they suppressing it there? Maybe a little.
Yeah, there's
But
a
more-
societal
but
suppression, but it's like left-handedism. Being left-handed was suppressed for
Yes.
for thousands of years amongst human beings. But once it was apparently in the 30s, scientists basically said there's no left-handedness doesn't actually do anything bad.
Right.
Left-handedness shot up. People just stopped training themselves to be right-handed, and this has
Well,
happened societally before, and that's the closest analog that I can think.
Now, panel, that conversation came from the discussion that Jon Cryer believes anti-trans bigots through lots and lots of money and crusading helped Donald Trump win. They went into that conversation about trans is just something like being left-handed. Josh, I turn back to you and ask for your reaction to that entire thing. Anti-trans bigots won the day for Trump, and by the way, it's just like being left-handed?
Yeah, well, I'm not left-handed, but I do have a son who's left-handed. But he understands that he is a male and that God created him that way. It's bizarre to think. I mean, it was a decisive election. Clearly, people were upset about immigration, about the economy, about a number of practical things. I don't think anti-transgender ideology had much at all to do with it. And Mrs. Obama lost me at Happy Holidays. I thought we were back to Merry Christmas now. That as a society, we've sort of developed tough enough skin to accept that, well, most people celebrate Christmas. And I think in both cases, the pundits are missing the mark. They're ignoring a majority of Americans or a huge number of the electorate who decisively voted for this man. And so maybe you're having a tough time, but a lot of Americans aren't, and they're hopeful.
Yeah, Valerie, I don't recall Mrs. Trump, for instance, in the first Trump term, greeting Americans by saying, "I know you're all having a tough go of it out there, those of you who didn't want us to win," or vice versa. By the way, her cutting an ad that said, "I know you Republicans are having a tough time because my husband didn't win a second term," even though he went on to. But you get my point, Valerie.
Absolutely, and I find Melania to be extremely classy, and I wouldn't say that Michelle Obama is not. Unfortunately, she kind of has a point because a lot of people have really been struggling dramatically with the results of this election, as if their lives are going to change for the worst, as if they're not going to be able to live in America anymore because they're not going to be welcomed or someone's going to try to kill them. I've heard these stories of real people saying these things, and when you have someone at a caliber of Michelle Obama feeding into it, you are feeding into a lie that is creating more mental health issues among people who look up to you.
Adam, transgenderism, anti-transgender hate helped Trump win. And by the way, we should all just get more comfortable with it. We used to hide people being left-handed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not anti-transgenderism, it's common sense. People are born male or born female, and the Bible says that, and all of creation and all of history testifies to that. And it was interesting to see Bill Maher, who is by no means a conservative or trans hater or anything like that, saying that. He said, why can't we accept that there's a baseline? And so here's someone who tends to be very sympathetic to leftist policies and liberal and whatnot, just using common sense and getting criticized by Mr. Cryer. So I think it's easy to see why Democrats did not prevail in this election. And just getting back to Michelle Obama for a second, I didn't like the intro to the video either, although she is addressing a constituency, right, that lives with a lot of fear and has been kind of in the Democrats' till for a long time. But really, the second half of it was actually kind of hopeful, or it looked like action, looked like things that, you know, whether or not I agree with those policies, at least they're doing something. That would have been actually a better message for the Democrats in this election. But instead, they kept playing the thing about transgender and all these identity politics, and they failed.
Which is actually an interesting point, because Democrat political strategist James Carville, maybe one of the most famous for the Democrats, said it's necessary that Democrats do some navel-gazing here, and he thinks it's time that they understand what they did wrong. Take a listen.
You know, Michael, there's a simple, basic rule of politics is voters want an election about them. They don't want an election about you or your opponent. And for too much, we lost that. I lost it myself. We made it about Trump, and we didn't make it about voters. And that's all. It's never a good idea. And how could I, at 80 years old, been doing this for 50 years, lapse into that level of stupidity? You know, I got to ask myself. But I think we did, and you know, let's learn from this. It's a disaster. I agree. It's depressing, but to have an event like this and not learn from it, I think, is the biggest mistake we can make.
It's funny, much like Mrs. Obama, he says he's depressed, but he's at least honest enough to admit that he fell victim to what, you know, Valerie was just saying, Josh, lost themselves, lost their minds, made it so much about Trump they weren't talking about actual folks.
Yeah, I'm glad he makes that admission. I think that's admirable, but he might be short of work in the next election cycle, because after 50 years of doing it, that seems like quite a mistake. But clearly, it didn't work out for the Democrats and the strategy. Let's stick to the Constitution here and a democratic republic. Maybe next time, don't just put a candidate in that hasn't received any primary votes. You know, there's a number of things that went wrong for the left. that I think the Constitution might even have something to say.
We turn to the anniversary of January 6th. You know, the certification of the election was this week. And over there at The View, the ladies of The View, Sunny Hostin, one of the hosts, said that we ought not forget this anniversary from the original date of January 6th, 2021 that made it famous. She said that that event was on par with some of history's worst. Take a listen.
Condoleezza Rice, I believe, on this very show saying, we need to move on from January 6th. I say no. You don't move on, because January 6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history, like World War II, things that happened, like the Holocaust, chattel slavery, we need to never forget, because past becomes prologue.
Wow. Okay. Clearly not the James Carville route, Valerie. Chattel slavery and the Holocaust.
I cannot believe that those two things are being compared to what happened on January 6th. I think that we can acknowledge that what happened was inappropriate. It should have never happened, but to compare it to millions of people dying or people being treated as if they're property, that is completely incorrect, completely inappropriate, and you're fear-mongering.
And finally, one of the more interesting things to shake out from this election is the about-face Mark Zuckerberg, chief of Meta, that runs Facebook and Instagram. He made some waves this week amongst the left in particular. Elon Musk before him did something similar. He made the announcement they're doing away with what they call fact checkers at Facebook. Take a listen.
More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created.
Adam, they said he has something like 40,000 fact checkers at Facebook. I don't know if they're all losing their job, but it sounds like a lot of them will.
Yeah, and that would be a good thing. I am really happy to see Mark Zuckerberg not only do the about face, but really admit where he and his organization have fallen short. And another thing that really excites me is I think Mark is coming out of the silo, or, you could call it an ivory tower. That's a reference to education. But he's from the East Coast. He's now living on the West Coast, Silicon Valley, California. He's in this silo with other tech millionaires and billionaires, and everyone kind of thinks like them. It's a lot what's happened in the media, that they're predominantly liberal. They all kind of agree on these things, and they're out of touch with reality and out of touch with real Americans, which is what the election proved. And so one thing he says in the video is they're going to move whatever fact-checking team or the people responsible for this to Texas, maybe to Austin, but at least get them out of a place that he admits, if they're all in California, all in Silicon Valley, that you can easily accuse them of bias, and you're probably right.
Good stuff, panel. Thank you. Remember, bookmark readlion.com. Check in regularly for all the latest headlines and commentary from our panel. And more to come from our team in just a minute. When we get back on the Lion Week in Review, we like to take a pick of stories that are our favorites that we don't want you to miss. Up next. Hey, welcome back to the Lion Week in Review. We wrap up with the week and final thoughts, as well as maybe a favorite story of the panel. Adam, we start with you.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to that clip from The View where the host Sunny Hostin was comparing January 6th to the Holocaust, chattel slavery, and other atrocities. What I think this really shows is that the many people in the mainstream media, or certainly the extreme leftists in the media, which sadly there's quite a few, are addicted to hate. They are addicted to race-based politics and identity politics. These people are addicted, and the caution I want to give is it's time to tune them out, or you might risk becoming like them. And it was very disturbing to see, and to hear people applauding and no one on the panel questioning. It's very sickening to me. You asked about a favorite story. For me, it is the changing course in San Francisco. And I say this in a hopeful tone, that voters are fed up. You can let your voice be heard. And if it can happen in San Francisco, if they can reverse course of this free money and hyper-liberalism and just being so permissive with the homeless and drug-addicted and mentally ill populations, it can happen anywhere. So take that to your home and your community, and don't be afraid to speak up and to vote and to pray for change.
Valerie, final thoughts, your favorite story?
Absolutely. If you check out our social medias, it's Read the Lion on X and Instagram, and then just the Lion on Facebook, you'll find a video of the Ohio State quarterback, Will Howard, moments after winning the Rose Bowl. And mind you, these are the college football playoffs, so now they are in the semifinals. He is doing this post-game victory interview, and they ask him a question, and he says, first and foremost, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And then moments later, he is denied access to the victory stage where all of his teammates are standing. They have a trophy, and then many times they do more interviews on that stage. You'll see him standing there in this video, and there is someone on the stage denying him access. He says they have it blocked on the other side too, so he has no way to get on the stage. But they told him the reason for this was a weight limit. But a lot of spectators have questioned whether or not this could have been religious discrimination, because they didn't want him to get on stage and mention God again. And so many people were saying, just get on the stage, just get on the stage. But we know never in history has there been a quarterback denied access to the victory stage. The quarterback is the person that's on the stage talking. We know, and shout out to Will Howard for standing up for what you believe in, but this is a crazy story.
Josh, your final thoughts and favorite story this week?
I had a chance to write a Lion year-end review for the last year. And, free speech and censorship were major issues. They played a big role in the election. People like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk coming out for Trump. And the Zuckerberg thing really is interesting. He's claiming that he's going to double down or reverse course and really be strong on promoting free speech and getting rid of censorship. I hope that he's going to do it. But I think this is one of the key issues of our time, and so I'm glad to see that and really happy that we're seeing this trend, Americans concerned about their First Amendment rights.
It's going to be a great year, and we're going to carry all of it at readlion.com. Panel, thank you, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. And again, if you missed any of today's show, check it out on YouTube. For all of us here at The Lion, thanks for downloading the show and listening, and we'll see you next week.